fact, we spoke about it the first time. We spoke about Nelson Mandela saying, life is in 3 buckets. Bucket 1, struggle,
success,
significance. Yes. So when you talk about American philanthropy, this is a great comparison. They tend to become philanthropic straight out of university. We tend to become philanthropic, giving our time and our talent and our treasure much later in life. If we did it earlier in life, A, we're adding diversity of perspective to the charities, and B, because we get so much from giving, it actually totally enriches our lives. But people don't see that until they've done it.
For many of us, our careers are integral and defining part of who we are. One of the first questions we ask someone that we've just met is, what do you do? Some people consider their career a calling, integral to their well-being, while others see it as a necessary tool to support other areas of their life. In this episode of It's Never About Money, we are thrilled to welcome Rachael McLennan from People for Purpose in our studio. Thanks for coming in. Building on our conversations with Dan Cumberland, Simon Griffiths and Alan English, and delving into the topic of finding meaning in one's career and the purpose in giving back. So Rachael will share her expertise on how professional skills can be leveraged to bring a social conscience and impactful leadership to the for-profit sector and helping in the not-for-profit sector. We will explore how aligning career goals with social impact can drive both personal fulfillment and broader societal change. So welcome, Rachael. I'm really happy to have you here. Thanks for coming in.
My pleasure, Joe. It's good to be here in person, and I love a conversation about it not all being about the money.
100%. We've had a few conversations about this, and I was thinking about how to start this episode. And first thing comes to mind is why it is that you do what you do, and how you had some pivotal moments reflecting on your mother's life that really impacted your choices later on. Perhaps you can share with us as a starting point your mother's story.
Sure. Thank you. It's interesting. I meet a lot of interesting people in my work, and I do think there's a coffee table book that is just everyone's life story, because I think everyone's story is unique and interesting, and hopefully mine is vaguely. I think the people that we are today, or myself, the person who I am today, is a product of what I have observed in my life, especially as a kid. And I think one of the things I observed very acutely was service and balance. Mm-hmm. So I saw my dad work a lot of hours, but not really for the money. Mm-hmm. He just worked really hard thinking it would lead to an outcome, and it didn't necessarily. We had a good life, but it was very modest. He made a few mistakes, but I loved him dearly. Was that
sort of family financial security sort of?
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
Yeah, I watched my mum, and my mum, I didn't know a lot about my mum's life until I was much older, but looking back on it now, and the pivotal point that you refer to, I'm sure we'll touch on, but looking back at it now, I am mind blown at how my mum managed to live in a world that is considered normal when she had such a not normal upbringing. Mm-hmm. So she was given to the Department of Children's Services when she was 15 months old. And they didn't necessarily want her. Nobody was going to pay the maintenance required, 42 shillings a week. So she was given to the Salvation Army. And the Salvation Army took care of my mother for 18 years. And when I left school and started thinking about my own journey, I reflected on my mum's life and her experience, and again was blown away that she could be a mum and a wife without having any of that modelled for her. She didn't have a mum to read stories to her. She didn't have anyone telling her they loved her. She didn't do family holidays. And we had all these things with not very much money. We had a really modest life, but we had all the things that my mum never had. So I felt really grateful for that. But I think the product of that for me was balance. It's never just about money. It is about contribution. My dad was a huge volunteer in the sporting club that we were participating in. So that's, yeah.
So what is it about that scenario? Is it about the extraordinary help that was afforded your mother, or the tragic circumstances as well in not having the ordinary upbringing, whatever ordinary means? Yeah,
it's true. Normal's a cycle on the washing machine. I think it was the tragedy. I do. I think I watched her, try and live, as I said, in this world that is considered or whatever that is normal. And it was hard.
Yep.
And so for me, it was always going to be about contributing back to the world because I felt really grateful that she had been such an amazing mum. So despite the shitty circumstances that she was raised in, she turned out to be an amazing human. And what could I do with my life that showed gratitude for that?
Yeah. The pattern change is extraordinary, right? So the idea that you've had a certain imprinting growing up, but then all of a sudden somehow you've got to leave that traumatic experience and not pass it somehow to the next generation.
Yeah.
She must be a very reflective person. She must have really worked through a lot of the things, or
look, I think she actually became a bit Teflon and just buried and stoic.
Okay.
Like they were.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's interesting you talk about what's passed down because that's a whole can of worms around what happens to other members of the family, definitely.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I would describe her as stoic.
Yeah. Was she able to also not just look after her family, but, in and of herself give back, or was that a step too far given just to get herself to the point of being able to do what she did was extraordinary with her family?
Yeah. No, she definitely, again, I was inspired by both of my parents, and my mum, despite her upbringing, was always of service.
Yep.
So she worked in a nursing home. Later in life, even when she was older, she still worked caring for patients who had dementia.
Yeah.
So she's worked as looking after young kids.
Yeah.
Even when her own had left the house. So she was always of service.
Amazing. So then you started off in the corporate world.
I did.
Why did you do that?
Well, so the other
says the financial advisor.
The other side of that is my dad.
Okay.
And so my dad worked really, really hard. He ran his own businesses, again, of service. He started as a policeman, but I suspect he made this decision for the betterment of his family and set up a family business. And it was hard work for not the returns that I think he expected. So although my dad did educate or invest in my education and my brothers, when I finished school, he was very, very keen on me just getting a job. Just be financially secure. Just make sure you can take care of yourself financially.
Where does that come from his perspective? Because I think there's a generational thing going on here as well around this sort of idea of being financially pragmatic, being financially secure ultimately, rather than being idealistic, which seems to be maybe a little bit more of that idealism is in our culture now than it was previously, I would say.
Look, my dad grew up very, very, very modest. He grew up on a dairy farm. There were way too many kids. They all worked very hard. My dad had 3 jobs at the age of about 15, starting work at midnight, working the milk run, then going to school, then having 2 jobs after school. So he was very much about just get a job. So that's why I started in the commercial world. I kind of skipped uni and went straight into the workforce.
And what caused you to shift from the commercial world? Was there any particular one moment, or was it that experience with your mum really just sort of that light that just kept on flaming within you?
Yeah, no, actually it wasn't necessarily like that. I don't think. I think it was a combination of things. I did work very hard in the commercial space. In fact, I was telling my son, who's about to start work in his life, I volunteered a lot in a commercial entity. I just used to volunteer my time so I could get noticed and climb the ladder, and worked in the hotel sector for a long time.
You worked in London earlier days as well. I think the Chelsea, something to do with the Chelsea Football Club, it was right next to Chelsea Village. Or?
Yeah, I started life in hotels. I got a job. My first job out of school, proper job, was in a hotel answering the telephones, and I managed to just climb my way up. Yeah. Moved to London because I followed a boy there. He's now my husband.
Oh, good. Yeah. I thought you were going to say something else. There's been other stories about that.
When I got to London, I realised, I just didn't have very much solid in terms of network or whatever. So I did get a job with hotels, but it was, as you've said, I kind of hustled my way in there to Chelsea. I didn't know anything about football. I didn't love football, but they had hotels that needed selling and I could sell hotels. So I took my way into a job there. But the moment that you talk about for me, I was working in the hotel industry in London, as you have just described, and 9/11 happened and the backside fell out of the hotel industry.
Did too.
And I was made redundant. A very wonderful mentor of mine, a gentleman by the name of Tim O'Neill, the commercial director at Chelsea, said, I have a feeling that the nonprofit sector is where it might be for you. And he was on the board of a children's charity and said, I think you should meet them. They'll like you and you'll like them. And that was very pivotal, but it happened at a time that was really also quite momentous because I came back from London for the Christmas holiday, sat in the backyard with my mum, and for the very first time ever, she really opened up about her upbringing with the Salvation Army. And it occurred to me then, this commercial thing is not sitting well with me. I need to do something in the world that somehow makes the world a better place, which sounds airy-fairy, but what can I do with my skills and experiences to contribute to the betterment of the world?
So how many roles did you have in the not-for-profit space, and is there anything there of note that was, I mean, it was probably plenty of note in there. I know we talk, there's organisations like Greenpeace and Smith Family and...
Yeah, we've worked with a lot at People for Purpose. I spent some time fundraising and I came back to Australia and didn't want to work for one charity.
Okay.
Too many good ones.
Yep.
Had the very great privilege of working with Social Ventures Australia, who really do provide consulting services to kind of lots of startup and scale up nonprofits. So I got to see the sector a lot. Joined my first nonprofit board there with a children's charity. And so I haven't actually worked for that many nonprofits, but I have worked with, I was going to say hundreds, maybe thousands, both in my role as founding CEO at Australian Philanthropic Services.
Oh, yes.
Yeah,
yes.
Helping high net worth set up private and public ancillary funds.
Yes, amazing. Yes,
Yeah.
well, yep.
Hopefully lots of your clients have those.
Yes.
Good.
We're definitely also just growing in this space more and more and more. I feel like Australia is slightly lagging the States in this space, but I'm optimistic.
Me too.
Yeah.
And you know what? I think we get unfairly compared to the States quite a lot.
Yes.
We've only had the structure since, I think, 2001.
Yep, fair point.
Yeah.
Yep.
And I think we have our own kind of culture of giving that's different.
Yep.
I have high hopes that we'll get there.
Yeah.
But yeah, so anyway, I worked with a lot of organisations there and both sides of giving there. So I worked with lots of philanthropists who were trying to work out how to strategically and intentionally give their money away, which is very, very hard.
Yes.
And working with lots of organisations as well that were recipients of those funds from the high net worths.
Yeah, in a way that's it seems like you've made a living out of bridging gaps.
I have, yeah.
Would that be true? Because when I thought about what you did, I try to simplify as much as I can for my brain to process. I can be simple at times. So when I thought about what you do, I just thought about a bridge. And so in terms of your actual organisation at the moment, rather than me make a meal of it and try to explain what it is you do, could you explain how you bridge the gap?
We build bridges.
Corporate refugees that you talk about as well, which was an interesting term that I had to think about. But could you talk us through that?
Well done, Joe. I've never thought of it like that, but that's exactly building bridges. So one of the things that my co-founder and I, Melissa and I, met working at Social Ventures Australia. She had come out of investment banking and also had a pivotal moment in her life that meant she wanted to work in the purpose space.
Was she also working till 1 a.m. in the morning?
Probably. So we met at SVA and Michael Trail, who I would describe as a mentor and, quite a trailblazer, pardon the pun, in the sector. Michael had talked always about the sector needing access, the non-profit sector, needing access to three things. Capital, capital, because we can't go to a bank like a commercial business and access capital the way, the sector accesses capital in different ways. So it needs access to capital. Yep. It needs access to evidence to prove what it is doing is working, to prove that social and environmental change is happening. And it also needs access to the brightest and the best people. We need the smartest people solving the most complex social and environmental problems. And at Social Ventures Australia, he addressed the first two but not the latter. And Melissa and I decided that we could do that, that we had met lots of really talented people wanting to make a contribution to something and lots of organisations needing great people, but nobody was sitting kind of at that nexus of very high-level leaders, governors and leaders, specifically for the non-profit sector. So what we do now is we work with the charities to understand strategy. We go and find them great people, unicorns, to sit on their boards and to sit in the CEO's seat. And we work with the other side of the market, the talent, the corporate refugees, the tens of thousands and hundreds of millions of people who want to make a contribution to the sector. We work with them to help them understand how the non-profit sector works in Australia so that they go in and A, have their eyes wide open and B, they make a great impact.
So we're not saying necessarily that we're taking people from their businesses as an example and plonking them all into not-for-profit sectors, but we're potentially providing them with opportunities to use some of their skill sets outside of work potentially as
100%. Yeah, absolutely.
So it's like, it's not just like we need to be thinking in binary terms and extreme terms about I'm either this way or I'm that way, but it's movement towards. And I think, like, when I think about why I put this podcast together, I'm not here to overwhelm people, and I'm certainly not here to tell people that I'm doing all of these things perfectly. In fact, we talked about previously, like, I'd like to do more, and sometimes I feel stuck between sort of progress and perfection.
Yeah.
So maybe talk to us around that, because that's part of the issue. People are like, well, what am I going to do with no time?
Yeah. Well, it's true. It's definitely not binary. You're absolutely right there. You don't have to do one thing or the other thing. You can do many. And I think I heard one of your October podcasts, Maya talking from Kids in Philanthropy, talking about the giving of time, talent and treasure. And I think as humans, what we have to acknowledge or be aware of is that those three things that we give, and I would add a fourth, there's time, talent, treasure and networks. All charities want the same things from people who help them out. It changes over time. So you might be giving your time as a volunteer as a younger person, and as you make more money, you might be giving your time and your talent or less time because you've got kids. It changes over time and evolves, but it definitely doesn't have to be a trade-off. And I think people wait too long to make that contribution, which is sad for a couple of reasons. One, we could use their talents in the sector. People think, in fact, we spoke about it the first time. We spoke about Nelson Mandela saying life is in three buckets. Bucket one, struggle,
success,
significance. Yes. So when you talk about American philanthropy, this is a great comparison. They tend to become philanthropic straight out of university. We tend to become philanthropic, giving our time and our talent and our treasure much later in life. If we did it earlier in life, A, we're adding diversity of perspective to the charities, and B, because we get so much from giving, it actually totally enriches our lives. But people don't see that until they've done it. So it's not binary. You don't have to say, well, you could say, you know, I can be the CEO of the big bank, or I can run that big family business. I talk about it like dessert, Joe. You don't fit it in. You squash it down on top.
Oh, well, that's absolutely perfect.
Yeah.
My family understands that.
I'll give you an example. My very first board role, I had, 2 kids and a young business and not much bandwidth. But I was asked to join the board of a charity called the National Centre for Childhood Grief, providing counselling to kids whose parents had died. And it was relevant to me because I had kids, and you sometimes imagine what their life would be like if you weren't here. And so I found myself contributing in this board, or to this board, but it didn't feel onerous at all. It felt I was so grateful for the opportunity to contribute in that way. You make it work.
What about those that feel, what skills could I have that could surely help with the problems of the world? And, am I a leader? Like, what does that mean to be a leader and being able to assist in that? Like, what would you say? Like, does everyone have some sort of leadership quality?
1,000%.
Yeah.
Yeah, because we're all leading in some way or form.
Yeah.
You lead your kids in the house, or you lead people in your business that are colleagues, or, you lead community. Even if you're not a leader, you're participating in leadership. And I think it's really important to acknowledge that. When you ask about what skill and experience, it's very interesting. We always start with purpose.
Yes.
So question 1 is, what is it that you care about? And not a lot of people have reflected on that.
Difficult thing to answer.
Yeah.
For some.
Yeah.
If you haven't really thought about it very much.
True, but we have a little quick exercise that we get people to run through.
Is that something that is quick enough to talk about now?
Absolutely.
Okay.
And your listeners can do this. And maybe they take 5 minutes after this podcast, but close your eyes and go back to being 7. Imagine what you were like when you were 7. Where did you live? What inspired you? What made you happy, sad? What was your life like? And move through your life in increments of 7, jotting down things on a sheet of paper that are coming to you. Who inspired you? Who made you cranky? What made you cranky? There will be things in your life that will be definitely moments of fortune or misfortune. Write them all down. And then you can either prioritize them or Venn diagram them. So it might be, I really care about regional and remote Australia because that's where I grew up, and I really value education because it's certainly changed my life. I'm making this up, by the way.
No.
So let's think about regional and remote and education. there's a good place to start. You have to start with purpose.
So we're looking for the points in those 7-year windows where we're talking about something that is either completely and utterly joyous, positive, momentous, or tragic, traumatic, and impactful in that sense.
Absolutely.
It's just anything that sort of pokes out.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. And when you say we don't do it or we haven't thought about it, we definitely can. It's in us.
Oh, yes, sure.
You just have to take a couple of minutes to go back and think about it.
Sure.
And for some people, it will be very obvious.
Yes. Sometimes it takes a moment to get out of our own heads and our own, the monotony of the patterns that exist on a day-to-day basis. And often that's why I think to myself, why do I have this propensity to want to go and travel? Part of it is because I just love traveling and it's amazing to see other places and experience those things. But the other part of it is to get away from the patterns.
Yeah.
And it just gives me the ability to, maybe I actually really value this and I've been ignoring it because I've been so busy.
And may I suggest that what you're valuing in that moment is the diversity of perspective that you have just provided yourself, which is what these organisations, especially boards, value. So when you say what skills and experience could people have, the number one thing that they will bring that's most valuable is the diversity of their perspective. What has led them to this point in their life? So yes, skills and experience are really important. You know,
Sure.
we love financial skills, we love strategy, we love stakeholder engagement, lots of things, but we also love your perspective as a human. You know, how did you grow up? How do you make decisions? Like the kind of operating rhythm of a person that comes to a board table is as valuable as their skills.
Do you think there's a generational difference in the way we think about philanthropy and giving back? And is that related to the difficulty of the time that we were brought up in?
Gosh.
Sorry, that's a difficult question to answer, but I feel like there is an answer.
I'm thinking about my own kids and how they might view philanthropy. I think it's different. I do think that the kids these days are very much, or they're much more aware than I was of those social and environmental challenges that exist. You know, they see the floods and they know about the environment, they know about climate change. And I think as parents, and I speak for myself, of course, we're far more open with our kids. You know, my dad was diagnosed with cancer. We talked about it immediately. So they're very acutely aware of the challenges and opportunities that might exist to solve some of those. So I think they do grow up with a different sense of philanthropy, potentially a more urgent one, to want to make a contribution. We see that playing out in some of the people who come to us knocking on the door of the sector, like younger board members or people with not a typical background, like not the bankers, lawyers, but people with lots of different backgrounds. Yeah. It's good. It's very important.
I feel like we've had a really exceptional period. I don't know how to put a time frame on that, but an exceptional period of success, wealth, a lot of us in Australia, I'm not saying to everybody, but there's, and I think that has some role to play in kind of like a Maslow's hierarchy of needs idea, where we now can think about others more and more and more because some of the physical health issues, the shelter issues have kind of been taken care of, or not so much is not an issue for us.
Yeah, not as as immediate.
Immediate or problematic.
Yeah.
I think maybe there's some of that is in this sort of idea that the next generation is really, really concerned about having work that is meaningful and is giving back as well.
That's it.
Because it seems to be a big thing for them.
Yeah.
So everyone's a leader.
Yeah, well, I think so.
I like the idea. And
I think everyone plays a role in leadership.
Yes.
I don't know if everyone's a leader.
Gotcha. So in terms of, let's play a game. In terms of leadership styles, and we've got 4 leadership styles. We've got servant leader, empathetic visionary, authoritarian disruptor, visionary innovator. Different styles. Mm-hmm. I wondered where you thought Nelson Mandela fits as a starting point.
Wow, I think he's probably a blend. Let me recall what you said.
I think they might all be a little bit. Yeah,
I would put him probably first. I think Look, empathetic visionary sounds obvious, but I'm going to put him in as servant leader.
Okay,
I think he really served his population. He was a very understated leader.
So I'm not going to give you the response yet, but that's a very good answer. I like that. What about Elon Musk?
Surely a visionary innovator.
What about Jacinda Ardern?
Yeah, again, a bit of a blend like Nelson. Servant leader, empathetic visionary. I'm going to go empathetic visionary.
Yep. And Donald Trump.
I'm putting him in the authoritarian disruptor.
You got 100%. Yeah. That was amazing. I wonder what you thought about when we think about the different leadership styles, and there's probably many of them, and this is binary because there's, you can adopt many of these aspects. But are there certain sort of leadership traits and styles that work well with some not-for-profit charities and others that work better for others? Like, is there a clash of styles? Like, if you're an authoritarian disruptor, is that going to be helpful in a particular area? Yeah,
look, I think so. I'm going to be a little bit specific. If I think about the ultimate leader, I'm going to say that's the chair.
Okay.
I think there's a book called The Fish Rots from the Head.
Yes.
And I think it's true. The chair, the board of directors, the CEO, the executive leadership team, they're all leaders. But let's just talk about the chair for a minute.
Yep.
I think the two overwhelmingly relevant leadership styles for a chair are servant leader and empathetic visionary. And I think the reason for that is because they have this very, very careful balance requirement to balance what we call head and heart. So they have to run a commercially viable entity whilst serving the needs of their participants, which is very heart-led. And often the two are conflicting. I'll give you an example.
Please.
Like Good Start Early Learning. Our mission is to ensure that no child cannot access early learning. But what if it makes no commercial sense to own a centre or open a centre in a remote community in Queensland? So the chair and the board and the leadership team and the CEO, they have a very careful balance of head and heart required. They have to make it work commercially, otherwise they're not here tomorrow. But they have to ensure they are meeting the needs of the participants, and that can be very difficult.
So someone who can actually take two competing ideas and grapple with them objectively without going mad.
Yeah.
In a way.
Yep. There's lots of those great chairs.
Okay. Yep. And can you share examples of leaders that have made meaningful impact in their space using a specific style? You did talk about empathetic visionary. Does anything come to mind for you?
Yeah, look, a lot of again, like I mentioned the first two, but I think a lot of the servant leadership qualities are very important also. You are motivating and inspiring people towards a common goal that is very complex in the human services space. And I don't want to name anyone in particular because there are so many good ones. And if I name one, then I might leave someone out. But you really have to know how to ignite and inspire that kind of brilliance, that kind of desire to create better lives for people across a very, very diverse range of stakeholders, across government who are trying to fund a certain thing and across your staff who just want to do good and across, it's very complex. So I think the leaders who get that right are the ones who are those servant leaders.
Okay. Talking to our audience who are listening, hopefully in large numbers, just wondering what options are available to them to inject some heart-led meaning into what they do?
Look, there's lots of practical ways that they can do it. And I think one thing that I should probably start by saying is that there is this theory, and not everybody holds it, but it does exist. It's a misconception that the non-profit sector or the charity sector has to learn from the commercial sector. But actually what you will learn is when you talk to a lot of leaders that we talked about, corporate refugees, the corporate refugees who have jumped ship from running a big commercial entity to running a non-profit will tell you it's much harder. It's not just profit, it's social outcomes. So there's a couple of things that they can do. They're very practical. Go in with eyes wide open, but, non-executive opportunities, so sitting on a board.
Okay.
Advisory councils, so the specific areas of focus that might contribute to a board, but you don't have the responsibility of the board.
Okay.
You're just providing advice.
Yes.
We have a saying at People for Purpose, there's an intrapreneurship. So stay in the business that you're in. If it's your own business, understand what you can do that will make a contribution, social or environmentally. Think about your operating practices or whether or not you're donating money. So stay in the business that you're in. Even if you work in a big commercial, it will have a corporate social responsibility team or policy. Interrogate what they're doing or join it and make it better. Then, of course, you can jump ship. So you can become a full-time CEO or an executive in the sector. And the other ways are volunteering. There is paid volunteering and there is unpaid volunteering. So unpaid volunteering might be planting trees for the National Parks and Wildlife or packing boxes of clothes for Thread Together. I'm a big fan of skilled volunteering because you're using your superpowers to really help. So it might be, an audit for an organisation or there's lots of different ways.
It's interesting because sometimes for an individual has a certain specific skill set, they're using it so much within their practice that skill set, when applied in a not-for-profit sector, as an example, yes, it has impact, but does it have the direct impact that they're looking for in the sense of if I was to just go out there and be in a soup kitchen? So there's an element of some, I imagine, I'm guessing here, some professionals who are looking to make a difference, but in a kind of maybe more granular way.
Yeah, 100%.
Do you see that ever?
Yeah, definitely. And again, back to the purpose point or the conversation we had around identifying or articulating purpose, Joe, this has to be articulated as well, and you kind of have to experiment to work it out. So for some people, changing one person's life might not be enough. They want to be the CEO of a human services thing that does 60,000 kids a day. That's it for them. But for others, they have all these wonderful skills that have come from commercial, but actually the soup kitchen thing is how it feels right for them. So what feels right for you in terms of giving and what feels right for me in terms of giving are allowed to be different. You have to work it out for you, what feels right for you.
And I suppose what you do is help.
Yeah, that's right.
Out.
That's right. We help work it out. Yes, we do.
So, okay. So what about you understand what you want from a heart perspective. You've got these specific skills. How do you then work out how those skills will actually translate into moving towards that heart-led activity?
Yeah, so I think, look, the advice...
Are there irrelevancies in certain skills? Like, this is an irrelevant skill. This is not going to help here. Or
it's very interesting you asked that question, are there skills that are irrelevant? Because I don't know is the answer.
Yeah.
I want to say probably not.
Okay.
But once you've articulated purpose and then you've defined your superpowers, you should be able to find a place to start. So let's say you've decided that it's animal welfare because you really love the cats and dogs and you're really good at numbers. You could either go and look for a volunteering position on a bunch of different platforms, Seek, Volunteer, Volley, there's lots of different ones. You can actually type in animal welfare and what your skills are and it will give you opportunities. So you've begun, great. You've started on a project tomorrow. You could also do some unskilled volunteering in that space. In terms of board roles, it's very interesting. Part of the reason we exist to build the bridges that you spoke of is because traditionally nonprofit boards have tried to interrogate their own networks to find new directors to do that succession planning piece. Part of the reason for that is 85% of the board roles in the sector are still unpaid. So it's very difficult for them to justify investing in search to find someone who's not going to be paid. That's changing quite a bit. But if, Joe, you wanted to find a board role, they're waiting for you. My recommendation to you is jump on LinkedIn, Google your favourite 5 animal charities, write them down, have a look on LinkedIn and see who's on their board. You'll know someone somewhere. Even if you don't, my observation is that people in this sector are very willing to be generous with their time and to share their experience so you can start your own journey. So if you said to the chair of the Cats and Dogs Home, I know you don't know me, could we please have a cup of tea and you can talk to me about how you do board succession or what I might look like on your board, would it be relevant? Guarantee more than 50% of them that you reach out to will drink coffee with you.
Wow, okay. If nothing more than an opportunity to connect with someone for a future opportunity as well and just helping.
1,000%. And do you know what they might say? Oh, Joe, this is great. Thank you so much. Look, we've just done a little bit of a board refresh, but we're going to have another one in 3 months' time when that person rolls off. Can we talk to you then?
Great.
Do you know what? When you're intentional about anything in life, of course, but I often say to people too, just put 20 minutes in your diary every week for the next 3 weeks to write down your purpose, write down your superpowers, and make like 3 outreach emails or LinkedIn messages.
Makes so much sense because often I imagine that you're getting a lot of people talking about, I want to give back, but I don't know how.
Yeah, lots of those.
So the first part of it is going through a sort of process.
This process, yeah.
And I believe you have workshops and so on that you run to help with this sort of stuff.
We do, yeah. We have 2 things. We have one workshop called Head and Heart that's exactly this, designed for the corporate refugee.
Yep.
And the other thing we ask people is to think about language because the sector prefers, like any sector, it has jargon. It prefers contribute to give back. Lots of people come say they want to give back. We ask them to consider using contribute instead.
Mm-hmm. And a reason between the words, the labels, give back versus contribute?
Look, it sounds less.
I love language, by the way, so I'm interested in why.
And I think the intention behind it is absolutely pure and good. So don't get me wrong.
No.
But there's a little bit of arrogance attached to give back.
Yep. Makes sense.
The intention is pure.
But the implementation is not always.
Yeah. It's like we prefer surplus to profit. You know, there are gentle nuances in the sector.
Yes.
I thought you would like that one.
Yes, true. So you have 3 kids.
I do.
How do you balance all of this with 3 children, and what do you hope to teach them by what you do and how you do it?
So we built People for Purpose. I'll answer it in this way. We built People for Purpose, and we have another business called Govern for Purpose. We built these 2 businesses to do 3 things. To leave the world a better place. I know it sounds cute, but do something meaningful in the world. Contribute to household income. So it never had to be the next Canva. It just had to pay the bills.
Gotcha.
And as you know, the money piece providing options and opportunity, it had to be nothing more than that. It's not all about the money. And it also had to enable us to be present in our families. So we had kids because we wanted to have kids. So the business had to have the flex and capability that enabled us to be at the swimming carnival or actually sit with the kid that has tonsillitis or pick mum up when she's just had hip surgery.
So that has a financial implication, all of these sort of decisions around being able to have the flexibility and autonomy to look after the family in the ways that you've described. How do you have a view on how someone actually approaches the delineation between what they require to run their life versus excluding contribution?
I think it's very personal. I think you have to determine that for you. But for me, it only works because of, I would describe, I think there's 2 words that kind of are my mantras in life. One of them is intentionality and one of them is surrender. So you really can't control everything. Sometimes things are going to go a little bit to poo, so just surrender to it. Just let the universe control the situation. You can't control it, one. But the intentionality piece is true because you're right. I co-founded and co-run 2 businesses. And I have 3 kids and I'm on 1 board and 1 advisory council and I'm completing the MBA in social impact.
Oh, wow.
And so I don't have a to-do list. Everything is in my diary very intentionally, including school pickups and drop-offs and swimming carnivals.
So has life always been like that for you? Or is it just has it become more full?
It became more full. The 3rd child really tipped me over the edge.
Talk to my brother about that,
And so when Isabella came along, I realised how important this intentionality piece was.
Sure.
So I got good at it. I'm not perfect. I learn and practice daily, but it's helped enormously.
How can you tell what to get rid of?
Well, I think a lot of people struggle with saying no, right?
Yes.
And people who are busy get asked a lot, right? And so I think saying no is a really good place to start. But it's not no, it's thank you so much. Can I do it in this way or in this time? It's just, I don't know, the nuances of how you respond.
Well, I'm privileged that you're sitting here. I appreciate the time. It's great.
I wanted to be here.
Yeah, no, it's amazing. It's amazing. I was just thinking about any moments where you kind of realised that you were leaning too much into the financial side and lost a little bit of meaning? Whether it be that you were working too hard, you weren't spending enough time with the family, or is there any critical moments where you got captured by societal expectations, the system that we're governed by? Do you know what I'm trying to ask?
I do.
I'm not doing very well with it.
No, you are. And I think for me, and my husband will tell you, it probably wasn't the money so much.
Yep.
I probably could be more intentional about that. It was probably more about the societal expectations around, like I felt like you have to take a bunch of steps to enable whatever success is. For me, the what's the word? Leadership capability and leadership experience and recognition was really important. I felt like I kind of needed a certain level of capability to be able to kind of leverage then into running my own business and being more actively contributing to boards. Mm-hmm. So the year was when my firstborn started kindergarten, and I was offered the CEO role at Australian Philanthropic Services. And I promised myself I would be home for her, drop off and pick up every day. And I was absolutely not. And it was a real trade-off. Yeah. Like, I feel like I have to take this opportunity because it's too good in terms of what might be beyond it, despite the fact that I can't see that. And so that was the decision I made.
Previously, we've talked about ikigai and this idea that it doesn't really stop just because you got to an age where personal exertion work may need to stop, or you're happy to stop. So this idea of retirement being a kind of, firstly, we've both agreed that the term itself, retirement, I need another word for it. But
yeah.
You kind of sound wacky as a financial planner when you try to use another word than retirement.
Yeah, we'll think of one.
We'll think of one. But this idea that, people just stop.
Yeah. Can I just say I love this conversation. I'm so glad we had that first conversation and this one about retirement. Yeah. I don't like the word. It doesn't exist.
No.
Retirement. And my husband, who's a little bit old school, also talks about retirement. Yeah. Sunshine, it doesn't exist.
Yeah.
For me, and again, I spend my days with people in that significant bucket.
Yep.
And someone said once, learn from other people's mistakes because you haven't got time to make your own.
Yep.
So I get to see all these incredible people who are kind of entering the final chapter of their life. Not that they're old by any means, but they're in the significant bucket. Yep. And I see that you get to choose what you do with your time and who you spend your time with as you leave kind of full-time work. So I see people building these incredibly diverse portfolios of ikigai, of things that really matter to them, of things that the world needs, of things that they're good at. We get to be really selfish is the wrong word. Yeah. Very selective about what we do and who we do it with.
As we're getting older?
100%.
We're clearer.
Yeah. That's right. And if you subscribe to blue zones where people live long lives.
I was just about to say. We're talking about people, I think it was in Okinawa, that are just the elders are revered to such an extent for their wisdom and the rest of it that they actually, it's a large one of the components of them living longer.
100%. And what keeps them healthy, body and mind, is contribution,
Correct.
Community, people.
And this does not change just because you've stopped making money from a occupation, right?
Yeah.
You've just shifted gears. And this is where there's an opportunity, I imagine, for you in your business to have amazing brains trust and experience of people that are looking for what is the next part, what is the next journey in their life.
It's actually very exciting. When they sit down, and in fact I did a LinkedIn post on this yesterday, I had approached someone who's very senior out of banking and insurance. And I said, I would really love you for this board role. I think there's values alignment and skills alignment. And the response was, actually, I'm just finishing my full-time executive career. I'm going to unplug, sit, work out exactly what it is that's going to motivate me to do the next thing, and then choose. People don't take the time to do that.
No, they don't. I think it's again, I think I'll talk for myself. I feel like once a pattern has formed, it takes a lot of conscious effort to cut that pattern and to give yourself the space and the unease of not having something to do.
It does. It takes that, and it also takes permission. You have to give yourself permission to do that. You have to give yourself permission to get off the treadmill or out of the rat race. And I think people find that very hard. You talked about societal expectations.
Yeah. So we're in an agreement that retirement is not
a thing.
Not a thing. We're in agreement that our sense of meaning is throughout our lifetime, regardless of our age, and our sense of wanting to contribute is absolutely there. And there's a large cohort of individuals who are coming towards a change in their career. How can they get some support? What are the next steps for them? What pathways are there to understand what their purpose is and make meaningful change and steps towards it?
Well, I feel like you've just opened the door for us to mention Head and Heart again, because our Head and Heart workshop is a very good place for that.
Yep.
It is our community service, if you like. So it's a space where all of those people can come and learn. But those three things: what is my purpose? What am I great at? And how do I draw steps towards a meaningful path from here? That's what our Head and Heart workshop does. But other ways to do it are to talk to people who have done it before. There's a couple of people who people may be familiar with. There's a gentleman called Steve Clifford who was the CEO of Second Bite here in Victoria, the food rescue charity. And he had spent 30 years as a lawyer, and he wrote a book called From Profit to Purpose, How to Make the Journey. And he wrote that book to help others learn. And same with, I refer back to my mentor, Michael Trail, the same thing. He wrote a book called Jumping Ship. And he says, basically, drink liters of coffee with people who have done it. They will share their experience with you very happily.
Even decaf if you don't like coffee. Which
Peppermint tea.
Peppermint tea. So just thinking about a few questions. Answer them however you like.
Okay.
What is one mistake that you made that you want your kids to observe and to have learned from?
Actually, I don't know if this is controversial because it is a little bit about money.
Love controversy, please.
Yeah. I really subscribe to the idea that business, like we were all told after school to go and get jobs, not to set up businesses.
Oh, yeah.
I wish I had been inspired to be more entrepreneurial earlier.
As an option?
Yeah, it wasn't even an option.
Right.
100%.
Yeah.
So I want my kids to know that continuing education and going and getting a job are not the only options. Entrepreneurialism, especially in the safety of the family unit, is a great place to start.
So entrepreneurialism also, would you think, requires a sense of security and safety to be able to do that?
Alarm.
We've got a fire alarm. Perfect.
That's funny.
That is funny. I'm not sure where we left off from that last. We were talking about, I suppose, one mistake that you've made that you would want your kids to learn from.
Yes, we're talking about
entrepreneurialism. But we went outside while the firemen and women did their job, which was to just leave again. And we talked about this idea of family dynamics, which I just found interesting anyway. So let's just add this into the podcast. Sure. Why not? So the idea being that problems tend to occur in families where parents parent in a style that is relevant to to a certain age group, but don't know when to change the pattern from, say, a more order style to a more collaborative style. And please. Let's talk about what we talked about outside.
Yeah. So we were just talking about exactly that. We're talking about grown-up adults here, and we were talking about philanthropy actually, and making decisions around giving money away.
Yes.
And I think what happens, or what I observe, is that it's funny. Someone said to me, when you have a child, you get a baby, right? And then a year or two later, the baby gets taken away, and you get a toddler. And then a year or two later, the toddler goes away and you get a child, and it asks lots of questions. Yes. And this continues to happen. We don't necessarily change our style as parents intentionally, one. And also there are no rites of passage in our modern society that really honour moving from a child to an adult. And one of the things I learned was that the children get to a certain point where they want to make the rules for you. So an exercise I went through with my son when he was a teenager was he was allowed to set rules for me, because all my life I had set rules for him, but he was becoming an adult with his own views and thoughts and feelings and opinions. And no one had ever stopped to hear what they were. They come out in the car and in all sorts of different places, but intentionality, stopping, acknowledging that the relationship is changing and acknowledging that you have to come at it from a different angle, not telling so much, asking a lot more.
And it was my observation that I think that, to do that, you have to have the observational skill to see that, and to have the observational skill to see that, you actually have to be present.
Yeah.
You have to be there.
That's right. Yes.
And so this can be the issue when people start to get busy.
Yeah, that's right. And we had again, when I was at Australian Philanthropic Services, we had the great privilege of working with many probably well-known and very wealthy people who had decided to give their money away, which was noble and wonderful. But we often sat, as you have sat, also in rooms where families are sitting and the next generation have different ideas about things. And to your point, Joe, we used to just make them stop and listen to each other and go away and decide, or go away and come back and decide, as opposed to trying to make a decision in that moment.
So if your kids were asked to capture the essence of you in the future, what you stood for, what you were passionate about, how would you want them to describe you?
Great question. Okay, I would want them to say that I was, I'm going to blend authentic and bold here. Like, I think you should, I really believe in rigorous honesty. So say the thing to the person who needs to hear it. I hope that's, and with honesty, but I think bold conversations, authentic. I'd like to think, if there's a word for of community, I do try and inspire them around all the work that I do. I work with so many wonderful charities. I try and bring those stories home to the children to make sure they know that their life is special and privileged. So of service or of community. And I don't know, fun.
Yeah.
Hopefully I've had time to have some fun with them.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And I always consider myself, when I set up the podcast, I said to myself, well, if I was the only audience member and I got a lot out of it, then it would be a win. So I suppose my question is, what is one action I should take and that the audience could take as well from our discussion?
I think one action that could be taken is to begin. I think a lot
Say that again, sorry.
To begin.
Okay.
I think a lot of people wait for the right moment to do something meaningful, or wait for the right opportunity, or wait for this or wait for that. Like, don't wait. Just do, because you get so much from doing. It will really enhance all the areas of your life. So I look forward to hearing about the board you've joined in about a month's time, Joe.
Maybe we'll wait till the new year, but yes, I like the pressure. So your spirit animal, what would be your spirit animal and why? Now, you would have heard Mayor Marcus's episode, so it's a very difficult question. No, it's probably the hardest question.
What's your spirit animal?
That's a good question. I've oscillated. Dolphin.
Oh, I nearly said manatee.
Manatee. Oh, yeah, the manatee. That's kind of it's very unique, isn't it, the manatee? Yeah, just the energy.
Yeah, they're just quite calm.
Yeah.
I'd like to think calm.
Yeah.
They like salad. Is that boring? They eat lettuce. They like the ocean. They like the sunshine. There we go. I'm a manatee.
You're a manatee. Amazing. Well, look, thank you so much for putting up with the fire.
It's a podcast I will not forget.
Yeah, it is live, everyone. Appreciate you coming into the studio and talking to us about some very important matters and what we do with our time, both at work and also external to work, and how it can really bring about a sense of meaning to our lives. It sits very nicely in a couple of other podcasts that I've had with guests that I know that you very much respect as well. And very much appreciate you coming on.
No, it's been great. I have really enjoyed the conversation, and my takeaway is to redefine retirement.
Yes.
Leave it with
Someone says
me.
refinement, but I don't like that one either.
I'll come back to you.
Good on you.
Thanks, Joe.
Thanks.
If you have resonated in any way with the sentiments of this podcast, we would be delighted to direct you to our website, www.itsneveraboutmoney.com.au, for more free resources and education aimed at improving your capacity to make sound financial decisions for the benefit of your family. We wish you every success, however you define it.